Greetings everyone, my name is Brawny Buck and today I'm here with the lovely Eliyora and we're going to be discussing an episode that I rather enjoy but not a lot of other people enjoy, Spike at Your Service. So what we're going to try to do here today is at least get each other to understand our different points of view. Eliyora, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, thank you very much, Brawny.
That's good. Now before we get started, why don't you tell us what type of videos you've been making for yourself?
Typically, I do reviews and analyses. I have a couple of theory headcanon on my page too. I kind of slowed down on my videos lately due to personal reasons, but season 4 kicking up, I'm getting back to it.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of people are in a similar situation right now. Now when it comes to Spike at Your Service, I like the episode. I think it's really funny. I think Spike's character in that is realistic on terms of the way a kid with a Bushido complex might react to a certain situation like that, as well as experiencing some sort of psychological, I'm not sure to call it trauma, but it's certainly something there that's motivating his actions just beyond his quote-unquote dragon code, and for that I feel the episode works. How do you feel about it?
My opinion is pretty well known for anyone who has seen even one of my videos by now. It sucked. It's that simple.
Alright, explain.
Well, they put Spike completely out of character, traumatized or otherwise. He's not stupid, and he's not so blind as to think that he owes Applejack his life because she saved him. First of all, they have saved each other's butts in the past. Why would that suddenly change?
When if they go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, no, never mind, you go first.
I did kind of interrupt, but I was going to ask, when have they saved each other in the past?
Well, the whole group has helped each other in the past and saved each other's lives, right?
Right, but right now I'm looking for specifics to Applejack and Spike. And sometimes...
No, okay, for specifics for Applejack and Spike, I can't really think of any. But, it's not like it's the first time someone's helped him. How about when Twilight, Rarity, and Rainbow came after him when those other dragons were about to beat him into the ground? He didn't go into some sort of dragon code thing then, did he?
I don't think his life was necessarily in danger at that point. With the Timberwolves, it would appear as though that was the case.
I would have to disagree on that even. Small or not, Spike's still a dragon, and he can still breathe fire. The Timberwolves are made of wood.
That much I can give you. I always thought it was kind of funny that Spike didn't think to breathe fire at the monsters made out of wood. It's also of consideration that in most lore, dragon scales are harder than diamonds.
And we've seen evidence of that in the show, too. Spike has said directly that he has thick scales.
Well, thick enough to not feel needles. Whether or not they're going with their traditional harder than diamonds, no matter what, the strongest substance on the planet type of thing as far as dragons, I think that remains to be seen. But it could certainly be inferred. So I can
give you... If nothing else, it proves that he's got a very tough hide.
So when it comes to dealing with Rarity and Twilight, he's already in a situation where he helps them a lot and returns the favors that they return for him. He's Twilight's assistant, and that's a very important part to his character, and that's a big deal to him. And he's in Rarity's boutique helping him all the time, so when they come and bail him out of that situation, he's already in a situation where he can return the favor. Whereas...
That's true, but what about Rainbow Dash?
That is an interesting point. Rainbow Dash, I'm not sure what to think about. You might have me there as well. What I was going to say was, Spike is the type of character that would want to repay that type of thing regardless. He usually does in some way or another. He is a smart character, we've seen that, but by the same token, he's capable of doing things that are not necessarily intelligent. Another example...
Yeah, but that can usually be attributed to his being a kid. I mean, I even said that outright when I did that video with Cam Goes Pony.
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to get a link from you and stick that in the description after this.
Alright.
So, what I was saying was, he's capable of being smart, and he's capable of rising to an occasion when the time comes, such as the Crystal Empire, Equestria Girls. There have been others, but they're not immediately coming to head.
Lesson Zero.
Lesson Zero is another one. You know, he is the yin to Twilight's yang or something like that. He's always there to help balance her out, and he's really good in that situation, partially because he's accustomed to being in that situation from having grown up in it all his life. But he's still a kid, so he's still capable of blowing things out of proportion. Owl's Well That Ends Well being the best example of this, where he let his jealousy get in the way, where he felt threatened by Owlicious. So there's another example where, you know, this Bushido complex comes in and he just has to serve her. He has no perceived purpose in his own life and doesn't really know what to do with himself when he's outside of that situation. And that brings me to another critique that a lot of people have about this episode, the way that Spike behaved around Applejack. And going back to what I had just said, I believe that can be applied here as well, because he's so accustomed to being with Twilight or being with Rarity, and now he's doing farm work or he's doing all sorts of other things on top of being in this mindset of trying too hard and being a kid who's capable of both rising to an occasion and extreme maturity when absolutely needed, but also when left to his own devices is capable of slipping up quite badly. Now he's in a situation where he's going to be messing up a whole lot around this farm and causing problems for Applejack. What do you think about all that?
I think that you're mistaken. I mean, okay, with farm work, Spike doesn't normally do that, even when the Maid Six are helping Applejack out on the farm. He's usually like at the library covering for Twilight, I guess, or something. But I keep on thinking of things like the basic household chores that he kept on blowing up, because that was where the primary screw-ups were happening. He was able to wash a pig, and then he destroyed a kitchen. Twice. Actually, 3 times. And, you know, since you brought it up, how about with him having grown up with Twilight? I pointed this out in the video I mentioned before, and I'll point it out again here. He's spent his whole life with Twilight, so he should know her better than anyone else. She was reading a book, very invested in that book, when he said he's going to go stay with Applejack from now on. And all he gets is an offhanded, that sounds great. How does he not realize that she is heavily invested in the book? He knows her better than anyone else does.
That's another thing that I would attribute to the state of mind that he was in.
I don't think that would cover it, though. In the very worst mindset, people that you know that well, like the back of your claw, so to speak, how do you miss this? Well, I mean, she wasn't even looking at him. Wasn't even facing his direction.
It is a common insecurity that Spike has, that he might someday not be needed around the library. And that's probably why he went to ask Twilight in the first place. He wanted to make sure it was okay with her to see if he was still needed. So it's easy to interpret something like that as being ignored, well, being ignored for the wrong reasons, as opposed to just, this is Twilight being Twilight and being invested in her books. So it's easy for someone to misinterpret something like that when they have insecurities of that nature.
I guess that's a good point, but I keep on thinking of the fact that has been dealt with twice in the series, with Owl's Well That Ends Well and in Crystal Empire.
Well, do characters and people always only need to go through a situation once or twice at the most in order to learn something?
I'm not saying that you're completely wrong. I mean, thinking about it, he did look really dejected when Twilight just kind of said, yeah, that sounds great. So, you have a point there. But it's just like, even if it was his insecurity, why didn't it register at all? He just completely accepted, I'm not needed anymore, even though she has reassured him on more than one occasion that he is.
The only justification I could have to that would be to pull it back to what I said earlier, is that sometimes those insecurities can really mess with your logical thinking.
I guess that's true.
And I've seen that happen to lesser degrees. What I can give a lot of people here is that in this episode things get turned up to a certain degree. Not necessarily realistically, or unrealistically rather, but in a manner where it's polarized so that it becomes more obvious, or that the intentions become more obvious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even like that part. I just am not a fan
It's
of
definitely
her
a change. It's definitely a change from the normal types of characterization that they do, where it's very subtle, very realistic, and you really have to understand things like characterization and mise-en-scène and facial expressions in order to see exactly what's going on throughout the entire thing. So it's a lot more overt than what they had usually done up until this point. I wouldn't call it bad quite yet. So I understand now why people think that's an issue, but I wouldn't call it bad quite yet. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't expect to change your mind at the drop of a hat, sir.
Well, it's entirely possible. It's been done before. Do you have any other points you'd like to bring up about this episode?
Plenty.
Do it.
This is probably just me nitpicking, but when he accidentally let that hot air balloon loose, how come no one tried to help him catch it? That was hot air balloon running wild. There are Pegasi and unicorns in that town. They could have gone up and, caught it easily, and you see people looking at him chase it.
That's definitely a nitpick. We've seen things like that go on in the show before several times where, things just happen and everybody's minding their own business and letting you handle your situation.
Yeah, I admit that's a nitpick. It's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. And shoot, Applejack, the whole reason this episode happened was because Applejack, if anything, went to go help Spike.
Yeah.
So there's something to think about as well.
Yeah, I know. But I said outright that was a nitpick.
Yep.
How about that fake Timberwolf that Spike fell for? What a pathetic puppet, and he completely bought it.
Yeah, I'm not I thought that was funny just for the sake of being funny,
It just was ridiculous to me, and I was already mad at the episode for making Spike so stupid. There's kid oblivious, and then there's stupid.
I have not seen a difference in my experience. Normally you have to train a child to not be oblivious so he can understand these things and thus, be a little less stupid.
Yeah, but I just comments at least.
Mm-hmm.
You have to gain that.
Maybe. Or maybe it could be one of those in-universe things where, as far as they can tell, it looks alright, but it's designed to be very obviously fake to the audience. Sometimes entertainment media does that as well.
True. But how about when that giant Timberwolf came to be? We saw twice the Timberwolves reassemble themselves. Then they reform themselves into the giant Timberwolf. And just a rock in its throat, and suddenly it gets itself together again?
What do you mean by that? They decided to form themselves into a large Timberwolf rather than a small one?
Rather than the three small ones. And yeah, when they reconstructed themselves into the giant Timberwolf to try to eat Spike and Applejack, but when Spike threw the pint-sized rock at its throat, most anticlimactic ending ever, by the way, it just choked and fell apart, and was no sign of it reconstructing itself as the big Timberwolf or even as the three small ones. It just went dead for no real reason and stayed that way.
So I'm not sure what your complaint is here. It sounded like you started on one thing and moved on to another.
I'm saying inconsistency. They showed in that exact episode that Timberwolves can reconstruct themselves. So why didn't they do it again?
I'm not sure. Maybe the way to defeat a Timberwolf is to choke it. Maybe you really have to mess it up on the inside in order to really do anything to it. There's other monsters in mythology that do that as well. Like the Hydra, for example. You couldn't cut off its head because it would grow 3 more. So the only way to kill it, I believe, was to...
I think it was stab its heart or something.
Yeah, stab its heart, or you had to find a way to get inside and do that. There's monsters that in mythology that can only be killed a certain way, and we've seen Friendship is Magic pull from those different types of mythologies before, so it's entirely possible that could be a situation here. But in all honesty, I've never seen a Timberwolf before. Not that I knew very much about mythology or monsters to begin with, but I've never seen a Timberwolf before or since.
I think Timberwolves are specific to MLP.
Which is entirely possible, so if that's the case, that would either have to be something that needs to be exposited on later, or it is a legitimate plot hole as you're pointing out. So there's definitely something there that can be considered. Anything else?
I have a whole page of notes here, but you keep on shooting me down here.
Well, that's what this is. This is point counterpoint.
I know. I'm just amused. Well, there is one other thing I should point out.
Go for it.
How Spike accepted AJ saying like 3 sentences to him about his dragon code and friends helping each other, and he just doesn't go into, like, she tried to do that at the start of the episode, and he goes into freak out mode, and now suddenly he's okay with it.
Usually sometimes characters have to go through one thing in order to get to another conclusion and be told the same thing twice, but now that they've been through everything else, they can look at it from a better perspective and understand what's going on. That's happened to me several times where I've been told the same thing multiple times, but it wasn't until later on, when stuck in a slightly different context, that everything made sense. So that being said, first thing you had to do was clear out Spike's mind of all the clutter. You had to get rid of the trauma, the stress, the trying too hard, the, getting stuck on the dragon code and obsessive, compulsive types of things that are just causing him to trip all over himself throughout the whole episode. First, you got to clear that out of his head. And the only way to do that was for him to save Applejack, which he did. So once he saved Applejack and everything's cleared up a little bit, things have calmed down, he's finally got himself to a point where he's open to hearing that kind of information. And then that's when, Applejack is straight and honest with him and says, look, next time someone tells you that it's all right, that I'm just doing you a favor because I'm your friend and that's what friends do to each other, that's all it needs to be. We don't need to hold debts with our friends and we don't need to repay those things. He was in a situation where he could be open to hearing that kind of thing and heeding the advice after everything else that had happened. He needed to go from point A to get to point B. Does that make sense? I know I said a lot there.
It does make sense, and yes, you do keep asking me that, but it makes sense. I disagree.
Why do you disagree?
I guess probably because I've never gone through something like that myself. It makes sense in my brain, but it's like I can't process it.
Because you're not pulling from the experience, am I correct?
Yeah.
Now here's a question for you. What does that mean for someone like me as an analyst? Am I reading too much into it because I'm pulling things from relatable experience, or does that mean that, what I'm seeing is actually there, but other people can't see it because of a lack of experience in that particular area, as you had just described?
It could be either or, in all honesty. Different people have different experiences, and that will lead to different conclusions. Some people just might disagree because they haven't experienced it themselves, or because they have a different experience.
I see. Have you ever been in a situation similar to what Spike went through in this episode?
Well, I've never been chased by wolves, if that's what you're asking.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt a need to repay a friend for a favor and you just weren't able to do it for whatever?
Honestly, yeah. I always feel the need to thank people when they're nice to me. I just try to find ways to do it that are not going to drown them, I don't like to overwhelm people, and I try to be mindful of whether or not I am. I guess that's part of what bugs me about this episode, because Spike is completely overwhelming Applejack.
Right, and you don't think that he's the type of character that would put himself in a situation where he's being that overbearing, is that correct?
It doesn't seem that way to me. I mean, he's had some insecurity moments in the past, like you pointed out earlier, where he has gone. But he always has been mindful and, to a degree, minus his sarcasm, respectful. It just doesn't feel like it's Spike.
Now, you don't think that he's capable of falling back into that type of thing after Owl's Well That Ends Well, when he's doing things like trying to defame Owlicious by framing him for murdering a cat toy and trying to pass it off as a real mouse, or what else did he do? He tried to do all sorts of things.
I don't remember. In all honesty, it wasn't even that he was being all that overwhelming or overbearing. He was just trying to get rid of Owlicious. Those were acts of jealousy. But he almost suffocated Applejack trying to help her breathe, which almost made her lungs explode, I should say. I mean, seriously, you cannot tell me that's not overbearing and just a slight bit ridiculous.
No, I can't, but I can tell you that it's hilarious slapstick. So you've got me there.
I can't argue with that.
You got me there, and that's That's another thing that the later episodes of Season 3 did a lot, that for some reason a lot of other people don't like. Maybe it's just because I've always had somewhat of a taste for slapstick, but that's what it is. There's a lot of things in this episode that were done to make them funny. The pumping up Applejack's lungs was just funny. The Timberwolf choking was just funny. The building the rock wall, they're playing on the character situations and finding situations to put him in where in this mindset he's going to react in a way that's supposed to be funny. But I think I'm starting to get it now that because everything else seems so off about Spike, that this seems like a character inconsistency. And then things you had brought up about the Timberwolves, so people are already getting tripped up on those, so they're having trouble finding the slapstick
just
funny.
Basic slapstick.
Right, and even then, slapstick is sort of a niche humor. There's not everybody enjoys slapstick. A pattern that I've noticed is especially...
They did a lot of that in Season 3, more so than they did in other seasons.
Yeah, and a pattern that I've especially noticed, and I don't know if this is true with you, so maybe you can help me out here, is that girls especially are not typically fans of slapstick. For example, all the guys in my family, myself included, we love the Three Stooges. All of my sisters, my older sister, all my younger sisters, my aunts, and my mother and my grandmother, not one of them likes the Three Stooges, but all the guys will get together. We used to get together on Sundays and just watch the Three Stooges for hours. So
honestly,
is that true with you?
I'm not the best person to ask about that. I'm pretty outside the box when it comes to a normal male-female mindset. So, but in my experience, that might actually have a ring of truth to it. Me and my sister and my mother, we're not the hugest fans of slapstick either.
Mm-hmm. So it isn't as common with females?
I guess not, now that I think about it.
Do you have anything else you'd like to bring up?
In all honesty, no, because most of my problem with Spike at your service is with Spike and his characterization, and we've already covered the other gripes that I had.
Right. They were legitimate criticisms. I do understand why people don't like it a little bit better than I did coming into this video. I also hope that I was able to explain some certain things and maybe get other people, I don't know if it worked on you, but perhaps anyone else that might be listening, help them understand the episode a little bit better. Do you have any...
I understand it a little bit better. Yep. I just don't like it any better.
Well, that's perfectly understandable. There's no way I can get someone to like something that they don't like. I can only get them to understand it. Because sometimes people don't like something because they don't understand it. And I know I'll have more videos on that particular topic in the future.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, I understand it a little bit better. I mean, part of me had kind of overlooked the whole different situation on a farm thing. That was a legitimate point. But just...
But I can concede that it was...
keep it away from me.
Yeah, but I can concede that... I can concede now that it was definitely polarized.
Yeah.
My theory is that it was polarized for the purpose of making it more obvious, whereas opposed to before, in previous episodes within this season, it had been done on a very realistic level, using subtlety, mise-en-scène, and facial expression and vocal inflection, rather than turning it up to the 10th degree so it becomes blatantly obvious.
They didn't slap it in your face. And that's one of the things that a lot of people love about MLP, that it's not some trying to shove it down your throat. So that's probably a large chunk of the reason people just don't like this episode.
Right. And even when it comes to episodes that a lot of people don't like, such as Spike at Your Service, for this very reason that we just established, I would say it's, this is the worst case scenario so far with Friendship is Magic, and it's still leagues beyond just about everything else on television in general.
Yeah, I'll absolutely agree with you on that.
Like, if you want to talk about slapping characterization in your face, let's have you and I sit down and try to watch an episode of, The Big Bang Theory, or Bones, or something like that. And I don't know how you feel about the... Exactly. Exactly. Do you have anything else you'd like to close out with? I've run out of things to say.
So have I.
Alrighty then, this has been a lovely discussion, hopefully one of many, and I hope everyone listening has a great day.
So do I. Very well, people.
And as always, there will be links to Eliyora's videos in the description. If you have a topic you would like to hear discussed, or if you have an episode, fanfiction, product, or anything else you would like to hear reviewed, send me a YouTube message or leave a comment below. You can also drop comments, questions, topic suggestions, and review suggestions by liking Brony Debates on Facebook, following on Twitter, or sending an email to bronydebates@yahoo.com. Have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from all of you soon.